How a relationship with a narcissist makes you start lying without even realizing it. One of the most agonizing and confusing aftermaths of surviving a narcissistic relationship is the haunting belief that you might be part of the problem. Victims often whisper this fear in therapy. What if I'm the narcissist? It's a tragic illusion born from immersion in a psychological ecosystem where lies, manipulation, and emotional distortion become the air you breathe. In families, romantic relationships, even workplaces or friendships dominated by narcissistic dynamics, this guilt metastasizes quietly. Psychologists call it introject shame, the process by which the victim absorbs the narcissist's blame until they begin to see themselves through the abuser's eyes. In these systems, adaptation becomes survival. The empath, the child, the partner all begin to twist themselves into shapes that fit the narcissist's ever-changing expectations. Over time, you learn to anticipate danger, to decode moods, to craft your words carefully to avoid rage or withdrawal. And in that process, something subtle but devastating happens. You begin to lie. Not the grand, malicious lies of the narcissist, but small distortions, half-truths, omissions, appeasements, born not from deceit, but from fear. Psychologists note that in narcissistic environments, lying becomes a survival mechanism. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a leading expert on narcissistic abuse, explains that such systems are built upon emotional landmines. Every truth becomes a potential trigger, every need an invitation for punishment. So the victim learns to navigate by silence and pretense. You tell the narcissist you're fine when you're broken inside. You smile when they humiliate you in front of others. You compliment them after they've wounded you, just to keep the peace. The deception isn't moral failure. It's a trauma adaptation. At the center of every narcissistic system lies a core delusion, the narcissist's perfection. Everything revolves around maintaining that illusion. Lies become sacred tools, used to polish their image, erase their cruelty, and rewrite reality itself. The narcissist's lies are not random. They are strategic acts of ego preservation. According to cognitive behavioral psychologists, narcissists construct a false self, a grandiose identity that conceals their deep feelings of inadequacy and shame. To protect that facade, they must continuously distort the truth. They lie to others to appear flawless, but more tragically, they lie to themselves to feel worthy of love. And so, the house of mirrors expands. The narcissist lies to maintain power. The family lies to maintain peace. The partner lies to avoid punishment. Each participant in this psychological theater becomes both victim and accomplice. As psychoanalyst Alice Miller once wrote, "The child of the narcissist learns early that truth is dangerous. So truth becomes hidden, buried beneath politeness, compliance, or emotional numbness." But here's the paradox. Even though the narcissist lies compulsively, they often despise being lied to. This hypocrisy is not accidental. It stems from what psychologists describe as ego fragility. Because their self-worth is externalized, any deviation from their version of reality feels like betrayal. They demand loyalty not to truth, but to their narrative. And when you expose the lie, they don't self-reflect, they retaliate. That retaliation comes in the form of gaslighting, a form of psychological warfare that inverts reality. They will accuse you of lying, twisting your perception until you question your own sanity. Over time, you stop confronting them. You learn that silence is safer, that appeasement buys peace, at least temporarily. But this compliance takes a psychological toll. Victims often describe feeling split in two, the public self that plays along and the private self that aches with dissonance. Trauma therapists identify this as cognitive fragmentation, a common symptom of long-term emotional abuse where victims suppress their authentic self just to survive. And so everyone lies. The narcissist lies to control. The partner lies to endure. The child lies to stay safe. The family lies to appear normal. The workplace lies to keep functioning. It's a collective delusion, a psychological infection that spreads silently. You begin to feel contaminated by it, even though it was never yours to begin with. Psychologically, this survival-based dishonesty can trigger profound guilt and self-reproach. Victims often emerge from these systems feeling morally compromised, ashamed of the ways they adapted. But as trauma-informed clinicians emphasize, survival is not sin. The lies you told were not acts of manipulation, they were acts of protection. You lied because telling the truth was dangerous. You smiled because frowning would have invited cruelty. You said yes because no would have unleashed chaos. Recovery begins with understanding this distinction. Healing requires self-forgiveness, recognizing that your small deceptions were the nervous system's way of staying safe in a psychologically unsafe environment. In therapy, survivors learn to reconnect with their authentic voice, to unlearn the instinct of appeasement, and to reestablish internal congruence. A state where what you feel, think, and express align once again. As one trauma psychologist described it, leaving a narcissistic system isn't just about escaping a person. It's about detoxing from distortion. The lies linger, not in the world around you, but inside your nervous system. You may still catch yourself softening truths, fearing honesty, or anticipating backlash where none exists. That's not weakness, it's conditioning. The antidote to that conditioning isn't confrontation, it's clarity. You heal by telling the truth not to the narcissist, but to yourself. You start small. That hurt. I was afraid. I deserve better. Each truth becomes an act of reclamation, a slow dismantling of the false reality that once held you captive. So yes, everyone lies in a narcissistic system, but only one side lies to dominate. The other lies to survive. And when you finally step out of that system, truth itself becomes your liberation. Because in the end, recovery isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real again. The Coffee Can story is more than a tale of hidden money. It's a symbol of quiet rebellion inside a psychological prison. It represents what trauma therapists call micro-resistance, those small, ingenious acts of self-preservation that people enact when their autonomy has been stripped away. Saving $20 in secret may look trivial to the outside world, but in the context of narcissistic control, it becomes an act of courage. Psychologists often describe such behaviors as adaptive survival strategies, ways to reclaim fragments of power within an environment that denies you any. Yet, even these tiny victories come at a cost. The secrecy that protects you also deepens your shame. You begin to feel duplicitous, guilty, as if your act of survival were a moral failing. Over time, this duality, of living truth internally but masking it externally, fractures the self. Psychodynamic theorists describe this as ego-splitting, a defense mechanism that allows individuals to maintain psychological stability when reality becomes unbearable. One part of you plays the role the narcissist demands, compliant, agreeable, predictable. The other part whispers the truth quietly to itself in moments of solitude. But the more you lie for safety, the more those two selves drift apart. Victims often describe feeling hollow or blurred inside, unable to tell where their authentic self ends and the false self begins. The narcissist, of course, thrives on this distortion. Their dominance depends on confusion, because confusion breeds compliance. As family therapists often note, narcissistic systems rely on what's known as double binds, situations where every choice is wrong. Tell the truth, and you'll be punished for disobedience. Lie, and you'll be punished for deceit. Either way, you lose and they win. It's a psychological trap that ensures you keep dancing around their expectations, always apologizing, always second-guessing. And the more tangled you become, the more they stand above you, claiming moral superiority. You're the liar, not me. This is the emotional sleight of hand at the heart of narcissistic abuse. The narcissist projects their own dishonesty onto you. Psychologists call this projective identification, a defense mechanism where the narcissist disowns their own flaws and induces others to carry them. You begin to internalize their accusation, feeling like the manipulative one, the untrustworthy one, the broken one. In therapy, survivors often say, "I became everything they accused me of." But in truth, what happened was psychological contamination. Their pathology seeped into you until you mistook it for your own reflection. As this cycle deepens, lying becomes second nature, not because you've become deceptive, but because your nervous system has learned that honesty equals danger. Neuroscientific studies on chronic trauma show that survivors of coercive control develop hypervigilant patterns of self-censorship. The brain's amygdala, its fear center, fires even at the thought of conflict. So you begin to lie automatically, not to manipulate, but to stay safe. You lie about being tired, about seeing a friend, about needing time alone. You lie about your feelings because you know that your feelings will be used against you. And each time you do, your body exhales in temporary relief, but your spirit carries another brick of shame. That shame becomes the invisible currency of narcissistic systems, keeps you loyal, quiet, and dependent. Dr. Brené Brown describes shame as the most powerful master emotion. It's the fear that we're not good enough. In narcissistic families and relationships, that fear becomes a weapon. The narcissist creates conditions where your every act of resistance, no matter how justified, can be reframed as proof of your moral failure. You hide money? You're deceitful. You visit a friend? You're unfaithful. You say no? You're selfish. Through repetition, this conditioning rewires your sense of worth until you no longer trust your own motives. What's most tragic is how this dynamic seeps into the next chapters of life. Survivors often find themselves lying in healthy relationships, not out of malice but out of habit. The nervous system, conditioned to expect punishment for truth, keeps whispering, "Don't tell them. It's safer if they don't know." This reflexive dishonesty can sabotage recovery, not because the survivor wants to deceive, but because their body has not yet learned that honesty is safe again. Trauma psychologists refer to this as learned protection, a behavioral residue of chronic hyperarousal that persists even after the threat is gone. Rebuilding authenticity requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands nervous system retraining. Therapists often begin with small truth-telling exercises, saying no to minor requests, sharing honest preferences, revealing small vulnerabilities. Each act of truth becomes a corrective experience, teaching the body that safety and honesty can coexist. Over time, this rewiring process allows survivors to reclaim what narcissistic conditioning stole from them, the ability to exist as a unified self, not a divided one. And yet, perhaps the cruelest irony of narcissistic systems is how they look so flawless from the outside. The smiling family portraits, the curated social media feeds, the perfect vacations. These are the masks that conceal decay. Psychologists call this impression management, a hallmark of narcissistic dynamics where appearance replaces authenticity. Outsiders see a well-functioning family or couple. Insiders live in quiet dread. The performance of happiness becomes so convincing that even the victims begin to doubt their own suffering. But behind those curated smiles lies a deeper truth, an emotional landscape littered with shame, secrecy, and fragmentation. Every lie told to keep the peace leaves another scar on the psyche. Over years, that cumulative damage manifests as chronic anxiety, emotional exhaustion, and an unshakable sense of inauthenticity. Survivors often say, "I don't even know who I am anymore." That's not drama. It's the clinical reality of identity erosion, the long-term outcome of living in an environment where truth was dangerous. The path forward is slow but possible. Healing begins with self-compassion, the radical acceptance that you did what you needed to do to survive. You weren't deceitful. You were desperate. You weren't manipulative. You were protecting your light from someone who would have extinguished it. And as that compassion grows, the lies start to lose their power. You begin to tell the truth again, not for the narcissist's sake, but for your own freedom. Because in the end, recovery is not about proving your honesty to anyone else. It's about learning that your truth no longer needs permission to exist. When you grow up in a narcissistic family, deception becomes the air you breathe before you even know what air is. It's not the malicious kind of lying. It's the kind of lie that children tell to survive. Psychologists specializing in developmental trauma, such as Dr. Judith Herman and Dr. Gabor Mate, explain that children in emotionally unsafe environments develop adaptive false selves, versions of themselves crafted to minimize harm. When every truth is punished, the psyche learns that silence and distortion equal safety. The child's nervous system encodes this lesson as law. Truth equals danger. Compliance equals survival. By the time the child becomes an adult, Their instinct to hide, to soften reality, to shapeshift, those reflexes are no longer choices. They're reflexive acts of self-protection, as automatic as blinking when something flies toward your eye. But what happens when that same survival mechanism follows you into adulthood? When you find yourself once again in a narcissistic relationship, this time with a partner instead of a parent. The pattern repeats, but the shame multiplies. You tell small lies, that you stopped at one store instead of another, that you had lunch with a colleague instead of a friend, that you're fine when you're emotionally disintegrating inside. To the outside observer, it might look deceitful. To the trauma-informed therapist, it's complex survival behavior, a desperate attempt to preserve autonomy in a system that punishes authenticity. Dr. Ramani Durvasula often says that truth in narcissistic systems is weaponized. Every vulnerability you share becomes ammunition. Every detail of your day a potential point of control. That's why the woman in your story lied about which store she went to, not because she wanted to deceive, but because she needed, in that microscopic act of rebellion, to feel like her own person again. In a world where every movement was tracked, every choice monitored, even a small deviation became a declaration of existence. It wasn't about hiding, it was about being. And yet, even that defiance comes with guilt. Survivors describe it as a bittersweet moment, a flash of autonomy wrapped in self-reproach. From a psychological standpoint, this internal conflict represents the double bind of narcissistic conditioning. When your very instinct to survive involves betraying your values, you experience what trauma psychologists call moral injury. It's the deep spiritual pain that arises when you must violate your own truth to stay alive. You hate the lies, yet you cannot stop telling them. You despise the secrecy, yet exposure feels lethal. It's the ultimate paradox of narcissistic abuse. Survival requires deceit, and deceit destroys the self. In therapy, survivors often describe feeling haunted by a sense of inauthenticity long after leaving the relationship. This happens because chronic deception, even self-protective deception, creates cognitive dissonance, the mind's way of trying to reconcile two conflicting truths. I'm a good person versus I've been dishonest. Over time, that tension corrodes self-trust. The victim begins to question their own moral compass, thinking maybe I am the narcissist. But this is the cruel illusion that narcissistic systems cultivate. They externalize their pathology so completely that the victim internalizes the blame. The narcissist calls you a liar, and slowly you start to believe them. It's important to remember what trauma experts repeatedly emphasize. Lying in a coercive environment is not moral failure, it's nervous system adaptation. The body's primary mission under chronic threat is to maintain psychological safety, not moral purity. When honesty leads to punishment, silence and distortion become the body's language of survival. As one trauma psychologist once put it, when truth is unsafe, deception becomes the nervous system's lullaby. You learn to lie not to manipulate others, but to soothe the terror inside you. And yet, the paradox persists. Even when you lie for survival, each falsehood leaves a bruise. Over time, those bruises form the emotional residue of toxic shame, a deep-seated belief that you are inherently bad. Shame is not guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame whispers, I am wrong. In narcissistic relationships, shame becomes the most potent instrument of control. The narcissist doesn't need to monitor your every move. The shame they've implanted does it for them. You become your own warden, censoring your truth before they ever have to. For many survivors, recovery begins with a single radical act: redefining what truth means. Truth in the context of abuse cannot always be spoken aloud. It can only be held internally. Sometimes your truth is the quiet knowledge that you're not crazy. Sometimes it's a private journal entry no one will ever see. Sometimes it's sitting in a therapist's office and, for the first time, saying the words, I lied because I was afraid. Each time you name it, you reclaim a fragment of the self that the narcissistic system demanded you deny. As you move further into healing, the lies begin to lose their power. You start recognizing that the deception wasn't about manipulation, it was about preservation of selfhood. You did what you had to do to stay alive in an environment where honesty was unsafe. Psychologists often describe recovery as a process of reintegrating the divided self, allowing the person you were forced to hide to finally come into the light. That's when authenticity stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling like liberation. In time, you realize something profound. The price of survival was steep, but it bought you the chance to stand where you are now, outside the system, breathing freely. The lies that once kept you safe no longer serve you, and the truth that once felt like death begins to feel like rebirth.